Good morning. It's Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014. I'm Oded Groper, and this is your morning edition on I-24 News. We begin at the Israeli-Syrian border, where tensions continue to rise. The Quneitra crossing is still held by Syrian rebels, and the fighting on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights continue to intensify, catching United Nations peacekeepers in the crossfire. Let's watch the latest report on the matter.
The situation along the Israel-Syria border and the Golan Heights remains volatile and unpredictable. Heavy fighting on the Syrian side between regime and rebel forces continued well into Monday, leading to at least one mortar shell landing in Israeli territory. This pushed the Israeli army to announce the closure of areas in the vicinity of the Quneitra border crossing, as well as Mount Bental, a situation uncomfortably similar to that which existed along the Israel-Gaza border until only a few days ago.
What we see is that al-Nusra, Hamas, Hezbollah, backed by Iran, Al-Qaeda, and these other terrorist groups are basically defying all international norms, breaking them, whether in Lebanon, in Syria, or in Gaza.
Explosions and exchanges of gunfire could be easily heard from Israeli territory on Monday. The Assad regime has been heavily bombarding rebel positions in the area, but so far the insurgents remain in control of large parts of the Syrian Golan, following advances made over the past week, including the Quneitra crossing, which was captured a few days ago. Syrian media has been reporting that a major regime offensive is being planned to recapture the crossing and parts of the town of Quneitra itself, though it is difficult to determine how reliable these reports are and if they do not represent a case of wishful thinking or even propaganda. While the rebel forces active near the border include jihadist fighters from the Nusra Front, a worrying development for Israel, it appears for now that the violence that has leaked across the border is not the result of a purposeful effort to involve Israel in the crisis. Even so, Israelis living in the Golan Heights are naturally concerned with the chaotic situation unfolding only a few kilometers away.
Joining us now live from the Israeli-Syrian border is Danny Zweibel, I-24 News correspondent. Good morning to you, Danny.
Good morning, Oded.
So what's the latest there? How are things looking on the ground?
Well, behind me, you could see that it is the Quneitra area. This was the scene of very heavy fighting yesterday between Syrian government forces and rebels, specifically the al-Nusra Front. Behind me to my left is the UN base, the UNDAF base. Currently, there are still 45 Fijian UN peacekeepers that are in captivity by al-Nusra. And we got reports earlier this morning that there were three demands that were meant to release them. The first one being that al-Nusra wants to be taken off the terrorist list, on the UN terrorist list. They want humanitarian aid sent to Damascus and surrounding areas. And third, they want compensation for 3 fighters that were allegedly killed in a shootout with UN peacekeeper officers. Right now here on the scene, we definitely hear gunshot fire in the background, mortar shells. It's going to be probably a very crazy day today as well as it was yesterday. Again, this is a very strategic location here in the Golan Heights. Rebel fighters that are stationed in Jordan are able to access this area. So the Syrian army definitely want to take it back. And we will surely keep you updated as things progress later today.
So no signs yet of the fighting subsiding there. Thank you so much, Danny. To discuss more on this matter, we're joined here in the studio by Channel 1 Foreign Affairs editor Oren Nahari. Good morning.
Hello,
to you.
morning.
And intelligence expert Yossi Melman. Good morning to you as well.
Good
morning. So let's begin with you, Oren. How are things looking on the ground there?
It depends on the question where is there and what is the ground, because we cannot isolate Syria these days, at least from what's happening in the region. And of course it started 3 years ago as part of the what so-called or used to be called the Arab Spring, but today it's part of a huge war inside the Islamic world between the Sunni and the Shia, and within them so many factions that against Bashar al-Assad we see in Syria, we see at least 3 militias, let's call them, the Free Syrian Army, let's say the moderate one, who should have received some help from the West but didn't. And then there is the Jabhat al-Nusra, who are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They were the worst, but not anymore, since we have now, of course, the Islamic State, which is basically try to wipe out, and succeeding to a great degree, wipe out the border between Iraq and Syria. They are operating mainly in Iraq, but their base is in Syria, and as long as the United States does not attack them inside Syria, they can always go there. And their pressure on the other factions, on Jabhat al-Nusra and on the Free Syrian Army, pushed them to the Golan Heights. It's not that they wanted to be here. It's not that it was such a strategic area for them in the first place, but they were pushed here because of the huge pressure. And these days we see all kinds of coalitions and mini coalitions. And again, we see the dilemma of President Obama trying to explain to himself and to his people, of course, after 3 years of saying that Bashar al-Assad is evil, should be removed, should be kicked out. How does he explain that if United States at last will intervene somewhere, somehow in Syria, it will be to bolster, even if indirectly, to bolster his position.
If we do try to focus more on the Quneitra region, who holds the border crossing at the moment?
At the moment, it's even now it's not totally clear, because there are all it comes and flows. But as I understand it, these days, perhaps Yossi will correct me if I'm wrong. But these days, the Quneitra crossing is the Free Syria Army, which is the more moderate faction. Israel lives well with this. Of course, the eye is always for the fear that the clashes, that everything that will happen there, of course, will drip to Israel itself.
Yossi, let's hear from you about the importance of this border crossing. What is it used for usually? Why is it so important to hold at the moment?
Well, before that, let me say that the situation on the ground is slightly more complicated than just described. Officially, the border crossing is held by non-Nusra Front elements. I say non-Nusra Front elements because the Free Syrian Army basically is just a virtual organization. It is fading away. And the remnants of this Free Syrian Army, little groups are operating on their own. There is no central command, and therefore the Free Syrian Army is dysfunctional. So the attack on the Quneitra crossing a few days ago was a joint operation of Nusra Front and the other little groups, which some of them represent the villages around the area, like local militia, village militias, and night watch, that kind of thing. Officially, Nusra is not present at the border crossing, but practically they control it. The Nusra Front control the entire area, almost the entire area of the 100-kilometer strip of the Israeli-Syrian border, from in the north from Mount Hermon to the south to the triangle border between Syria, Israel, and Jordan. It's a practice by the Nusra Front and other Islamist groups not to take over crossings, but basically to be behind the scenes. The border crossing is not important.
Okay.
It has never been important.
It's more of a symbol.
It's a symbol. It was used mainly for three purposes: the movement of the UNDOF, the UN peacekeeping forces, back and forth between Syria and Israel, allowing the Druze community to communicate with their brothers in Syria, especially for marriages and university studies. Young Druze students used to go to Syria, and finally to produce mainly apples from Golan, the Israeli side of the Golan, to Syria. So it's a symbolic. But it is also representing the old order between Israel and Syria, the 40-year-old order since the Yom Kippur War.
Which still holds? I mean, the agreements that still holds. I mean, we've seen Assad bring in forces into the Golan Heights.
It is holding, but already since the outbreak of the civil war in Syria, Israel, for example, is turning a blind eye for the violations of these disengagement agreement. For example, there is a demilitarized zone on both sides, but mostly largely on the Syrian side, and you are not allowed to have overflights and to present of tanks.
Right.
Israel has ignored it, and in that sense is trying to help the Assad regime and the Assad army to take over and control that area. Just yesterday, the Syrian army sent airplanes to attack the rebel positions near Quneitra. They failed, they didn't succeed, but Israel is saying the devil we know, at least along the border, is better than our
And the
certainty.
unknown, of course, of
And
course.
it's true for Sinai as well, that Israel allows or turns a blind eye to Egypt to send army to Sinai to battle the Al-Qaeda elements with the Bedouins there. But Yossi mentioned, and it's important, the Druze community. We remember Syria is something like 60% Sunni who are against the regime, but there are 40%, 35% who are minorities. And these minorities, the Christians, the Druze, the Alawites, of course, they look at Iraq, the Kurds, they look at Iraq, they look at the Islamic State, and they fear for their lives literally.
Right.
They see what's happening with the Yazidis, they see what's happening, and they tend to affiliate with the regime. Again, as Yossi mentioned, and rightfully so, the devil that they know was a secular devil, was a devil that let them live their life. And the one who shouts Allahu Akbar and forces them to convert and sell their women and girls to slavery, no other word for it, this is the much more frightening element.
Certainly. Now, we've seen this bleed into Israel as well. We've seen mortar fire land in Israel.
It doesn't count. I mean, okay, Israel says and should say this is a violation of our sovereignty, but Israel knows the truth. Israel knows the truth that up to now, we are fortunate that this huge Armageddon almost between our enemies hasn't dripped over to Israeli borders, that Israel up to now, I'm putting the recent Gaza operation aside because that's a different matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't connect to the Islamic State as well. It is not, Israel is not part of it. Israel does not suffer. Of course, there's a fear that if Al-Qaeda start to trench itself, or Islamic State, on our borders, it'll take 2 years, 5 years, but sooner or later they'll turn their eyes to us.
But
But up until now, Israel has not suffered the consequences. Look, we are talking in Syria alone, we are talking more than 200,000 dead. And in Israeli Golan, not one.
Yeah.
So, okay, we should count our blessings in this
We're
respect.
still, I mean, Israel still fires back from
Yes.
time to time, and I'm afraid
As a
that
show, of
if
course.
something will hit something a little more substantial, will Israel still be able to hold back?
Yes. Israel should hold back. I mean, that's for governments are for. And Israel, if you practice a little, even the people in the Golan, the settlers in the Golan, and every Israeli there knows that Israel should not be involved in what's happening in Syria. Right. We should help humanitarianly. We should keep an eye. But nobody has the interest that it'll go to either side of the border. I remind you that foreign sources said that Israel attacked in Syria several times in the last 6 years, including a nuclear reactor, etc. And Assad had to grit his teeth and do nothing about it, and vice versa.
His plate was full. Yossi, how do you see this matter? Do you agree that Israel will stay out for as long as possible?
Well, the official Israeli policy was non-intervention. But practically Israel did interfere in the war. The Israeli policy vis-a-vis Syria is as follows. We, as Oren said, we attacked 6 times, 7 times airstrikes against convoys and of sophisticated weapons, mainly long-range missiles, land-sea missiles that Syrian regime was obliged to supply to Hezbollah. Why? Because Hezbollah is an ally of Syria, of the Syrian regime, and is fighting alongside the Syrian forces. Right. Secondly, Israel is responding, is retaliating whenever there is a fire directed at Israel, whether it's an errant fire or deliberate fire. And always the Israeli retaliatory response is against Syrian positions. Why? Because Israel argument is Assad and the regime are the sovereign
Responsible.
and they are responsible.
I see.
And thirdly, the Israeli but it's an interesting point to emphasize that the deliberate fire. There had been so far 10 incidents in which mines or explosives or mortar shells or even fire were directed at Israel, and in all deliberately on purpose. In all these incidents, Hezbollah was behind. Hezbollah with the Syrian army turning a blind eye, or Hezbollah's local subcontractors. Why Hezbollah did it? Just as a retaliation on punishment against Israeli operations inside Lebanon. Now, the biggest Israeli intervention, which is quiet, no one talks about it, is the so-called humanitarian aid. First of all, Israel has a field hospital at the border.
Right. So
far, more than 1,000 wounded and patients have been treated at this hospital, and some of them transferred to the larger Israeli hospitals in Haifa and in Safat, in the northern Galilee. It's a humanitarian by nature, but also it is helping Israel to maintain ties with the local elders, the local leaders of the villages and in the villages around the Israeli border, for one purpose: to keep quiet and peace along the border. Right. This is the ultimate Israeli interest.
Yeah. Now, where's the UN in all this? Because
the UN is a disintegrating force. Already, it's not the first time that UN peacekeepers were abducted by the rebels.
Yeah.
By the way, they are still holding the 43 Fijian soldiers.
Released demands that don't seem very likely to actually happen.
I'm not sure about the UN. They are going to negotiate with them and maybe they'll surrender. But above all, already 2 years ago, Israel had to struggle and to really hard at the UN to convince the Security Council to renew the mandate of of UNDOF, of the UN peacekeeping force there. Very few countries are ready to contribute to the force. The Filipinos were agreed to be part of this force. Why? Because they are well paid.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned that Obama should have, could have, would have, but didn't.
But
the UN will step in. Anyone?
The UN, the UN will condemn, but not more than that. The UN, we have to remember that when not only is the force disintegrating, the UN maintained that its mission all around the world is peacekeeping. Right. First, bring the peace, and then if you mean it, we shall keep it. But not more than that and no less than that. I don't see anybody intervening. At the most, what I can see is that some countries, perhaps the European Union, who start to feel a little bit of unease to what's happening in its border, Ukraine, and we'll talk about it later, and the crisis in the Middle East. So we see for the first time the Germany sending high-grade weapons, not only equipment, but weapons to the Kurds fighting against the Islamic State. I'm talking about the G3 assault rifles, which is a fantastic weapon. And we're talking about the Milan anti-tanks systems, and we're talking grenades, etc., etc. And it's important to note that Angela Merkel does it, but 2/3 of the people of Germany are against sending weapons to the Kurds who are fighting the Islamic militia, because they say, okay, maybe they'll come here and do a terror attack on our soil.
Them now, who knows who they're going to point their weapons to.
Even in the West, even when they look and see the huge danger that there are 500 Germans who went to recruit to the Islamic State, and they'll come back with the jihadist idea and knowledge and ideology and what have you, there's a little bit of fear. But yes, I see the United States. I think that in the next couple of weeks, depending how the combats go on the ground, perhaps they'll intervene from the air. I don't see, and perhaps again small units will come and do specific commando operations, but not more than that. We'll not see an army. A NATO army or a NATO units or United States units coming here. They've had enough of the Middle East.
We will, of course, keep following the matter there. Thank you so much, John. And now to Pakistan, where anti-government protesters have broken into the state television station in central Islamabad and cut transmissions of the broadcaster's news services in Urdu and English for 45 minutes. We're joined from Islamabad, Pakistan, by freelance journalist Mina Sohail. Good morning, Mina.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for speaking to us this morning. So can you tell me what's the situation there like?
Right, so on Sunday we had a really crucial Corps commanders meeting where people were waiting anxiously to see what would emerge from that given our history of military coups. They released a statement saying that they support democracy and they have advised the government, which a lot of people contest that that's not really the military's job, but they've advised the government to resolve this issue politically between the political parties amicably. Islamabad really has been paralyzed for almost 2 weeks now with the siege of about a few thousands of people that an opposition leader and a cleric have brought along with them from Lahore. And just yesterday, the Pakistan state television, the government channel, was attacked by a mob of people who clashed with the police outside, but they managed to go inside the state television, which was off air briefly, and then the army took over because currently the military is in control of Islamabad. The government asked it to take control of the city.
I see. Mina, stay with us, please. Let's watch a report about the situation there. We'll come back to hear from you more.
Hundreds of protesters trying to topple Pakistan's government stormed the state television headquarters on Monday as fresh clashes with police broke out in Islamabad. Transmission of the main news channel was cut minutes after an anchor announced demonstrators had entered the building and besieged staff. Imran Khan, a Pakistani cricket hero turned politician who has been leading the protest, expressed regret for storming the TV offices.
I apologize for any of our workers entering any buildings. No worker entered any building at our behest. They just became sentimental, which I condemn. There was no justification for it. We have to remain peaceful. We are not to enter any government buildings. We are not to resort to any destruction.
Yet the violence can be misleading, according to some, claiming the latest clashes are nothing more than a political battle.
What we're seeing in Islamabad is neither a revolution nor a movement. It is the pursuit of power by two individuals, one of whom has a dedicated cult following, and the other, a very small dedicated cult following, and the other who has a political party that is probably number 2 or number 3 in the country. But by no stretch of the imagination is this either a revolution or a movement. This is the pursuit of political office.
Opposition groups marched to the capital on August 15 in order to try to oust Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, triggering a crisis that forced the military to intervene. The army urged the government and protesters to settle their differences peacefully, yet during the weekend clashes alone, nearly 100 police officers and nearly 500 people were injured, including some children. The protest leaders have managed to draw thousands to the streets of Islamabad, but their call hasn't mobilized mass support in the country of 180 million people that has been ruled for half its history by the military.
So we're going back to Mina Sohail in Islamabad. Mina, this is an ongoing situation. How is normal life in the country? How does that continue?
Well, basically, this area, the red zone, which has the Parliament House and the Prime Minister's house and very important government buildings, that entire area has been sealed. I was off from work for quite a few days. Offices have been off. I mean, our economy came to a standstill, I would say, for about 2 weeks, where businesses were shut off nearby in those areas, not just there, but in Karachi and Lahore, other cities too, because protesters have been gathering in other cities too, as Imran Khan and the cleric Tahir al-Qadri have urged their supporters in different cities to come out. So yes, for about 2 weeks, we have been affected economically. The daily life has been. Things are now getting back to normal a bit, and like the report said, we really not are expecting a revolution at this point. The Imran Khan, the opposition leader, had promised to bring about 1 million people with him, but media reports say that only about 10 to 20,000 people came to the city. The situation has been a little precarious because just over the weekend, the police clashed with the protesters and used tear gas and rubber bullets, as a result of which 3 people have been reported dead, and over 100 have been reported injured. They're still there. They're still outside the Prime Minister house. But we'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Right. So what lasting effect do you think this might have, if any?
Well, analysts have been saying that this will damage democracy again in this country for the next 5, 10, 15 years. When Nawaz Sharif, the current prime minister, came into power, this was the first time there was a democratic transition in our over 60 years of history in Pakistan, but he has been the prime minister only for over about a year, and this has been the biggest threat to his government right now.
Right. Mina Sohail, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Owen, if you will, give me your take on the matter.
First of all, the central government in Pakistan, the element that is non-military, non-security service, was always weak. And we have to remember that this is the 3rd time that Nawaz Sharif comes to power, and he was thrown twice by coups and allegations of corruption. The president, Zardari, who is the widow of Benazir Bhutto, which you remember again, spent many years in Qatar hiding away again for allegations of corruption. So at the moment, we are talking about 180 million people, a country that is relevant to remember, that is a nuclear power, that the security services invented and held up and propped up and still do the Taliban and Al-Qaeda up to a big degree, and that this country will not be stable, and it is not stable, is giving the shivers all around the area, and these shivers could and should reach ours as well. Again, we remember that Iran, the nuclear program of Iran, started with Pakistan, with the famous Dr. Khan, who sold or gave his secrets away. So again, ripple effects in Pakistan not stay only in the Indian subcontinent. It arrives very quickly to all corners of the earth.
The list of threats grows longer. Thank you, Owen, so much. Thank you, Yossi, as well. We'll be back after the break. British Prime Minister David Cameron announces new anti-terror measures. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Good morning, thanks for staying with us. In the UK, new anti-terror measures were presented by Prime Minister David Cameron to fight the return of extremists back to the country. It's estimated that 500 British citizens have traveled to the Middle East to fight for different militant groups in the region. To hear more on how the UK plans to deal with the matter, we're joined on the phone by Jonathan Sakradari from London. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
So what measures were presented by Prime Minister Cameron?
David Cameron wanted to make it clear that Britain is going to be tougher on these 500 plus jihadis said to have left the United Kingdom to go and fight with Islamic fundamentalist forces in Syria and Iraq. And so the new measures that he announced included tighter controls on where people who the state felt were becoming radicalized, as they put it, here in the UK, tighter controls on where they could live, on their travel to this region by perhaps removing their passports. There was, of course, talk of even removing their citizenship, and similar measures like these but he's run into trouble with his coalition partners who don't back most of the measures he wishes to put in place. And that means that despite announcing these changes, it's not actually clear how much of this he'll be able to put in place.
I see. How are people in Britain reacting to this ideas? Because obviously some personal liberties will be in danger here.
That's right. Well, British people are rather nervous about the idea of getting too involved in more wars in Iraq and in the Middle East at large, thanks to their experience with the Iraq war previously and the war in Afghanistan. As such, it's not just measures on civil liberties that people are afraid of, but they are afraid of that, when Mr. Cameron also suggested that we may be able to get involved in bombing of jihadis without asking Parliament, as he did last time he wanted to intervene in Syria. These are not things that are supported by the majority of the UK population. Only 35% of people believe that the UK should launch airstrikes against ISIS, with 50% disagreeing and 15% unable to decide, according to a poll announced in the Times newspaper today. And similarly, when it comes to restrictions on people's movements and the removal of passports and citizenship, these are not necessarily popular moves. On the other hand, there is a recognition among society here in the United Kingdom that we do need to act, and we need to act firmly when it comes to British-born jihadis who are flying out to the Middle East to get involved in brutal wars. And when we saw the beheading video involving a killer apparently with a British accent, and these people being able to return back to the United Kingdom with the jihadi skills they have learned in the region and potentially being able to carry out terror attacks here in the United Kingdom, then people are also demanding some sort of protection under the law from this kind of activity. So it's a bit of a conflict for the majority of people in the UK to know what they would prefer: some sort of curbs on civil liberties that would enable the security services to better monitor and limit the ability of such suspects, or more freedom and higher risk.
Of course. Now, we've seen that beheading video and heard that accent, and the number thrown around, 500 people in the Middle East that might come back. Does that sound right to you?
Well, that's the official number, is around 500 who are said to be fighting there. And then just over the last couple of days, more people are becoming known to the government and to the intelligence services. Another 2 jihadi females have been uncovered in the last day or two. They are believed to have married jihadi extremists, and they too have been declaring their jihadi intent on websites and online. These things are worrying for people to see here, especially when they do hear British voices like the accent of the alleged killer in that video. People cannot understand how it has come to be that those born in the United Kingdom have somehow taken on board this extremist ideology and traveled out to a region far from home in order to engage in brutal killings, including, for example, this beheading with a knife. People don't understand how British-born men and women are able to somehow adopt this ideology and then have the freedom to fly back here with those skills and those ideas fresh in their mind.
Yeah, it is puzzling. Jonathan Secredati in London, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dad.
Moving on now to the Ukrainian saga. Following days of fierce clashes, the Ukrainian military has withdrew some of its troops from key positions in the east of the country. Meanwhile, Russia continues to claim it will not intervene in the crisis in the region. Still with us in the studio, Channel 1's Foreign Affairs editor Oren Hari. Thank you for staying with us. Good morning again. Let's take a look at the report about the latest and come back to you.
A new school year got underway in Ukraine on Monday, but looking at the situation on the ground, nothing new has been learned so far in the country's east. Ukrainian army forces were forced to retreat from the international airport in Luhansk Monday after an overnight attack by pro-Russian separatists. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, who met Russian President Vladimir Putin last week in Minsk, Belarus, accused Moscow of new provocations and vowed not to stand silently in face of the escalation.
Direct and open aggression has been launched against Ukraine from a neighboring state. This has changed the situation in the zone of conflict in a radical way and raises new and more difficult questions for our security bodies.
і на порядок складніші питання.
As the conflict continues in the battlefield and on the negotiation table, Ukrainians are marking the beginning of the school year in a bittersweet tone. Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk, who accompanied his daughter to school, expressed deep concern at the ongoing situation.
The 1st of September ceremony was not held in every school. There is not a peaceful sky in every part of Ukraine. We must fight for a peaceful sky.
Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin reacted for the first time to the expected sanctions announced Saturday by the EU. He also slammed the Ukrainian authorities for refusing to hold direct talks with the separatists.
What is the essence of the tragedy that is happening there in Ukraine right now? I think the main reason for that is that the current Kiev leadership does not want to carry out a substantive political dialogue with the east of its country.
With one hand reaching for peace and the other feeding the separatists, Russian leaders can teach a few things about war and international politics.
Owen, yet another region that the unrest that seems to be everlasting.
Yes. Well, not exactly everlasting. It's in the last several months since, of course, the leader who was more or less Yanukovych, who was an ally of Moscow, was toppled.
Yeah.
And from then we see the chain of events coming now to this. Now it's almost funny the way that Russia continues without flinching, without blinking, to say that we are not involved, although every satellite image and pictures from the ground and funerals of soldiers, Russian soldiers who fell in Ukraine continue to be in Russia, but still they say, okay, we are not involved, it's all separatist. But the undertone is very, very alarming. Today what they are saying that these separatists in Donetsk and other regions are not only the Republic of Donetsk, it's Novorossiya, New Russia, meaning of course that they want to annex this area to Russia, and also Russia as well, saying that the east of the country, the east of Ukraine, should be granted a state position.
Right.
That they should
East
be
Ukraine.
East Ukraine, and of course, from being an independent country, it will be an ally at least of Russia, if not annexed outright to Russia. We can understand, looking from afar, that Russia says, okay, we are a superpower, used to be, or is still. We are a superpower. We have a military, we have nuclear weapons. We do remember that the United States almost went to nuclear war for fear that Cuba, 90 miles from its border, will be a base for Russia. Ukraine used to be the USSR, not only an ally, not part of the communist bloc. It used to be part of the USSR. Kiev was the ancient capital of Russia. The Pravoslav Church was born there. The Cyrillic writing was born there. And you say that you want them to be part of the European Union or be part of NATO forces on our borders. The Warsaw Alliance was dissolved. Why NATO still exists? So from their point of view, there is part of the paranoia that is justified. On the other hand, of course, the countries, we are now on the 75th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II. And we remember that it started, of course, with the Wehrmacht, with Nazi invasion of Poland. But the other part was part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact that Russia, that the USSR invaded the east of Poland and the Baltic states, etc. Those countries, with Hungary, with Poland and other countries, they fear for their lives that if Ukraine goes without punishment, without anything, and Russia swallows Ukraine, a country of 50 million people, a huge country, what will happen next? Yeah. And this is the fear. And unlike Ukraine, Hungary, Poland, the Baltics are part of NATO. And again, any military pact, its basic rule is the Three Musketeers, all for one, one for all. If one is attacked, not attacking, but attacked, the whole alliance must rush to its aid. So if Russia does a wrong move, will it come to not a Cold War, but a hot war, something that the world did not see and thought they will never see again with the fall of the Berlin Wall?
Of course. Let's bring into the debate on the phone Paula Slier, the Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia Today. Paula, she'll join us in just a little bit.
So we'll continue. We mentioned NATO these Thursday and Friday in Cardiff, Wales.
Where is this might go?
The leaders of NATO meet in Cardiff, in Wales. Obama, Merkel, Cameron, what have you. And one of their suggestions, and it will probably pass, is to establish a rapid involvement force a new NATO force for involvement in crisis. It could be Islamic State, more probably, but their eyes is on Ukraine. They want to deter Russia. And
so they might actually fight Russian forces?
No, they will not. They will not do it. There'll be no military intervention in Ukraine. First of all, Ukraine is not part of NATO. Second, to try a military intervention on Russia's border is an adventure that will not. Yeah, but it will not go well. I mean, they cannot send enough forces there to battle Russia that has armies on its.
So, what sort of intervention might they take?
First of all, it's a statement. Second, the NATO forces, and they are trying to, and they think again that they in the last 10 years they cut their defense expenditures, and Britain and Germany are saying, and they're saying it out loud, perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps we thought that peace will be all over the globe, and as we see today, this is not exactly the case. We need to bolster our defense. The European Union is not well defended from all sorts of fronts, from the south with the Islamic jihadists, from the east with perhaps Russia being more and more assertive, not to say aggressive. So we have to do something. We have to think about the Arctic. Russia is claiming now the Arctic waters with all the huge things below it, with the oil, with the gas, with all kinds of minerals. We have to say that we'll not roll over and play dead in front of Russia. We have to do some statement, and this is the time to do it.
Yeah, it does seem as if Russia has recognized some weaknesses and is simply trying to get the most out of it.
I'm not sure that there's so much strategy as being swept in the tide of events, that Putin is playing it along as he goes along. So yes, he annexed Crimea, and probably Crimea will be part of Ukraine, and he sent his armored columns into Ukraine when the Ukrainian army destroyed the rebels. And he destroyed the rebels up until a week ago. So Putin sent his armored columns to try to help them, and they succeeded beyond his greatest thoughts. And where does it head now? We have to remember that Russia is never, Talleyrand, the legendary foreign minister of Napoleon, said once, Russia is never as strong as it seems and never as weak as it seems. So Russia is not that strong. Russia is weak economically. And if the sanctions of the European Union are put into place, new rounds of sanctions, it will hurt Russia's economy.
So
and
let's
the European
hear
Union
from Paula Slier, the Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia today, about how things look from Russia. Good morning to you, Paula.
Good morning.
You're in the Ukraine, of course. I'm sorry. Tell me, how do you view the situation there?
Look, Russia has repeatedly said that it is not directly assisting the anti-government fighters here, those that are taking on the Ukrainian military. And Russia has repeatedly denied that it sent its troops across the border. Russia, in fact, has mocked the kind of so-called proof, that's what it called, the evidence that the Europeans said that they put forward to show that there were columns of Russian tanks inside Ukraine. So we have very much the same kind of rhetoric, Russia insisting that any kind of Russian fighters that are inside Ukraine are there in their personal capacity and have not been sanctioned by Moscow to actually come here. Let me mention what the mood is like on the ground. I'm in the city of Donetsk, and for the past few days, the Ukrainian military has been forced to retreat from a number of cities. So you have the anti-government fighters that are pushing forward. We've spent a few days in the town of Ilovaisk, where the Ukrainian army was forced to surrender. We spoke to a lot of the, let's call them pro-Russian fighters there, saying that they're quite satisfied with the way the fighting on the ground is going, and they intend to keep pushing forward until they reclaim this whole part of the country. There were very important talks that happened yesterday in the Belarusian capital of Minsk. It was potentially the first time that you had representatives from these fighters meeting with representatives of the Kiev government. And while we're being told not to expect a major breakthrough, it does seem as if there's some movement on the diplomatic front.
I see. Now, how do you view the possible results or possible intervention by NATO in the future in the region?
Look, that is one of the very big concerns that Russia has had from the beginning, and Russia's always put forward the argument that how would the Americans feel if suddenly there was a buildup of troops on America's borders? They don't want to see any kind of buildup of troops on the Russian borders, and if there was going to be an intervention by NATO, they would feel that that was a direct confrontation. So Russia is, of course, concerned by the situation, and this is why Russia does not want to.
Paula, unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm going to have to cut you off there. Thank you so much. Thank you as well, Owen. And when we come back, we'll hear more and see Arab and Jewish children play soccer together. Welcome back. It's still Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014. This is still the morning edition, and I'm still Oded Grober. Thank you so much for staying with us. We'll start now with saying hello and good morning to Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines. Anthony, how are you this morning?
Fine. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Always a pleasure to see you. What do you have for us today?
Well, I'm going to start with something from the Washington Post. Of course, news broke about American strikes against al-Shabaab in Somalia, but a little bit more obscure, although becoming more clear now, is some more plans of American sort of activity on the military front in Africa. The Washington Post reports that the Pentagon is set to open a second drone base in Niger as it expands operations in Africa, or Niger, however you pronounce it.
So we'll see. So, the drones, the American drones are pretty much everywhere by now.
It does seem like they're in an increasing number of hot spots around the globe, and the Washington Post points out here that this is the second surveillance hub in, I guess I should say, Niger, and the third in the region. And this is basically to help track Islamist fighters who have been destabilizing swaths really of North and West Africa. And there's also some collaboration with France on this. So that's an interesting development as well.
It is indeed.
Also on the other coast, Los Angeles Times, of course, is also talking about Ukraine, as we've been discussing this morning. Headline there, Ukraine crisis may solve NATO's identity crisis. And it's kind of like an analytical piece, but also kind of a front pager, which is basically saying that NATO should in some ways perhaps thank Putin for bringing the issue to the table of how relevant is NATO today. And apparently, very relevant, and we're going to see how in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, it is an interesting take on it. We heard on this matter in the previous hour that it's a very, very touchy situation there, because NATO versus Russia isn't going to happen, but it's certainly some other countries in the region that are members of NATO might maybe find themselves in this mess.
Indeed, and of course the Telegraph reported that apparently Putin has said that if he wanted to, he could take Kiev in 2 weeks. So NATO is going to become ever more relevant as that rhetoric continues to escalate.
Yeah. They say that, but they're also saying they're not involved. They had nothing to do with it. They don't even know what's going on.
No one knows.
Let's keep going.
Volkskrant, which is my favorite newspaper in the Netherlands, has a headline here, which is a little bit small there, but I think it says, another important tool in the fight against IS, the Islamic State, and that would be humor. We know that the Islamic State, as pernicious as it is, takes to social media as much as it can to promote its twisted messages, but a lot of people are fighting back with sort of tongue-in-cheek, sassy tweets and such of their own. And this is not the first paper that's been tracking this development, but it is sort of something that we're seeing a lot of, sort of the social media users fighting back in their social media way against some of these outrageous messages and comments that the Islamic State people are posting. So interesting to see that.
Yeah, I saw one cartoon that merged it with the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. That you see a beheading and then takes off his hood and says, "Now I challenge Ahmed Mahmoud."
Yeah. Or there's something here about instead of to kill a mockingbird, to kill a mockingbird. Is that a new? I mean, there's some of them go pretty low. But the thing is, IS uses social media as a platform. Really so this is a counter platform that that now in the mainstream press is being picked up on. Also in the American press, the story of these 3 Americans who were detained in North Korea. Time has reported on this. They're calling for U.S. help. These 3 guys, Jeffrey Fowle, Kenneth Bay, and Matthew Miller, are basically being detained on perhaps spurious charges in North Korea. One of them, Jeffrey Fowle, arrived in North Korea in April, and he's suspected of leaving a Bible in a nightclub. Now, this is
serious allegations.
I think if you're going to North Korea for night clubbing, maybe you should have taken that plane to Ibiza instead. But anyway, this is serious stuff. You know, you're not supposed to proselytize in North Korea. It's a no-no. You know, it's taboo. And apparently, these guys may have been doing that, who knows, or inadvertently, and they want high-level American sort of intervention to sort of get them out of North Korea. So,
do we know if that was the purpose of their visit?
It's a little bit murky if that was the purpose. They went as tourists, but the North Koreans are saying that they basically subverted their touristic purpose by, it's kind of trumped up charges basically. And one of them is actually already serving part of a 15-year prison term, basically, or in forced labor.
Not going to help the relations between the countries.
They were frosty to begin with, so this is maybe a thaw could be in sight if there's spurs dialogue. Yeah, but right now it doesn't seem to be in the cards. Also, Americans in hot water in a different area. Hurriyet, Turkish paper, reports that Turkey's foreign ministry has summoned the U.S. charge d'affaires over spying claims. And this is something that is not a huge problem at the moment, but it's like a continuation of the whole Edward Snowden affair of these revelations coming out.
Nobody's really surprised that the U.S. was spying in Turkey.
But apparently, they've been spying on Turkey, and the U.K. spying on Turkey for years. And Erdogan actually has sort of downplayed the significance of it, saying publicly that, well, everyone kind of, eavesdrops.
On everybody.
But still, that's the top-ranking U.S. diplomat in Ankara, aside from the ambassador, of course, who was sort of being questioned about what exactly has been going on.
Right.
So, a bit of a thorn in Turkish-American relations right there. Wall Street Journal reports that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is looking to improve ties with Japan to counter Chinese power plays, basically. And he's on a 5-day tour of Japan this week. He's meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and they are talking about how to build democratic ties between them. Probably security issues are also on the agenda.
Interesting. Certainly a huge force to be reckoned with, India, and they could have, putting the Japanese on their side instead of the Chinese, it's a smaller force, but...
Japan has been doing a little bit of muscle flexing in the past, several months, especially in response to Chinese sort of more aggressive posturing in the entire Asian region.
One more we have time for?
Back to Japan, actually. The Guardian reports that a Japanese earthquake could potentially wipe out the entire nation's toilet paper supply, which is kind of an interesting headline. And they are encouraging Japanese to stock up on toilet paper in the case of a huge earthquake, because 40% of the nation's toilet paper comes from the Shizuoka province.
Right.
And that's earthquake prone.
I don't know if earthquake would happen. I'm not sure that toilet paper would be my first priority.
Well, water,
but,
food, toilet paper.
It's
yeah, exactly.
Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're joined now in the studio by the director of the sports department at the Paris Center for Peace, Tami Chai, who is here to tell us about the most unique soccer team ever. Good morning to you, Tami.
Good morning to you.
So I want to hear from you about it, but first we have a report by Tal Shalev, our reporter. Let's watch that. Come back to you.
Operation Protective Edge stole the spotlight from other news events. Among them, the end of the 7-year term of office of the Israeli president. But no worries, a month after leaving the president's residence, Shimon Peres is far from leaving the spotlight. Throughout the Gaza fighting, Peres continued to do his thing, advocating Israel in international interviews. Now that the violence ended, he is back to his trademark cause, his restless attempt to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
The young generation is carrying a message of peace.
in a loud and friendly way. It's a case where children are teaching their parents how to live in peace.
While on both sides of the border, Israelis and Palestinians are only beginning to heal the conflict's wounds, Paris decided to bring them together and marked the opening of the school year with a joint football training session just on the Gaza border. 50 Israeli children from Sderot and Sha'ar HaNegev met with 20 Palestinian kids from the Yada village near Hebron and played out all the tensions in football.
We play and enjoy. It has nothing to do with politics.
It's good to let loose now and just play football. We were already reunited.
For more than a decade, the Paris Center for Peace has been twinning Israeli and Palestinian boys and girls for various sport activities, establishing schools for football and peace. Once a month, they play football together in mixed teams. The common message of football exceeds the hostilities and breaks down barriers, even in times of tension, like today.
By participating in an Israeli-Palestinian group of players, the kids get to see the variety in identities on the Palestinian side and see that there are people here who still wish for peace.
Paris hails football's contribution to the peace process, but so far there are no Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts on the horizon, and the uncertainties in the region are growing by the day. But one can count on two things: football beats it all, and Paris has no intention of going away. Tal Shalev, I-24 News.
So, Tommy, it's a wonderful project, of course, but I would imagine it's an ongoing project. Am I right?
It's an ongoing project. We opened basically yesterday the 12th year of the program.
I see. I would imagine that this year things might be a little more difficult than usual.
That's true, and obviously this is the reality that we are facing. But on the same time, this is not the first escalation of violence that we were facing throughout the year of the program. Unfortunately, there were 3 operations with Gaza, and most of our participants, the Jewish participants, the Israeli ones, are coming from the southern communities of Israel, attacked by the rockets in the last 14 years. And this is what we get in every year in terms of the situation with the kids.
Right. So what sort of reactions do you see with the kids when they come and take part?
So for the newcomers, of course, at the first meeting when they meet the Palestinian kids, it's a difficult situation for them. They are stressed. They have lots of fears. They never met a Palestinian in their life, so all the stereotypes are there on the field. But for the ones that are participating in our programs for several years, they are helping the newcomers, to get into the activity and to integrate and to cooperate and with their Palestinian friends.
Right.
So this is a process, and you will not see immediate results. And for all of us, it's a situation when we need to take a deep breath in the beginning of the year, like yesterday, understand what we have and what we need to work with, and believe in our good work, because we do a good work, because this is the only chance for the kids on both sides to meet the other side.
And year by year, do you see the progress made?
Yes, of course. Otherwise, we will not do this. This program is evaluated on a regular basis. We get a feedback from the parents, from the kids, from the coaches. We speak with the kids. You see the kids that are participating coming back every year. This is not just, and also Per said it yesterday, this is not just a soccer program. This is a peace program. This is a peace school. We educate them by using an amazing tool like soccer.
Right. Now, have they talked about their experiences in the last few weeks? Have they, spoken to each other about it?
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, we have the language barrier, and this needs to be understood, because Palestinians are not speaking a word in Hebrew, and the Israelis we're not speaking Arabic. So we are sitting together we did yesterday on the field while Mr. Peres was there, and discussing about the experiences from the last summer, because we said of course it's fun, they want to play together and they just want to play, but we also need to talk.
Right.
So
there's always involvement by some grown-up that...
Of course.
I see.
There are coaches on both sides that are leading leading the teams, the mixed teams, educators, and us, the team from the Paris Center for
So
Peace.
what sort of experiences
So
were they
there were
sharing?
diverse experiences, of course. Some kids from Sderot were saying that for them, finally, they are here on the pitch for the first time since the war ended, running freely and playing together without really thinking with whom they're playing with.
Right.
And the same goes for the Palestinians, because they were thinking also about what is happening in Israel and waiting for that moment to meet again. And the coaches, of course, were also bringing the voices of the adults, which is also important for the process, and saying this is a great opportunity to show for the Israeli kids and also to show for our kids that no matter what is happening on the political, spectrum, let's say, we have to continue and to create for those kids a different reality and to bring them and create them hope.
Of course, give them at least the idea of a better future.
Yes, that's true, because they deserve both sides. This is also what Paris spoke to them when we were opening the event and the practice yesterday. He said, "You are the future.
Yeah.
You will show that there is another way."
Certainly hope so. Tamichai, it's a wonderful program. Thank you so much for working on it and for coming here and telling us about it.
Thank you guys too.
We're almost done with this part of our show. We'll be back after the break. Hollywood experienced the worst summer in decades. We'll hear all about that. But first, some more of this morning's headlines. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. Let's say hello and good morning again to Sir Anthony Grant.
Hello.
That's you, Tony.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Again.
And you're here to tell us what's trending on the web. What might that be?
Well, if you missed your cup of coffee, you can wake up with the latest Jennifer Lawrence scandal developments, as the internet world is doing. Now,
yes, guide us through it.
Well,
please.
basically, it's just, I don't want to say it's the scandal that keeps on giving, but as long as those leaked photos are out there, it's still going to be causing tongues to wag. The Mirror in the UK says, according to this, Jennifer Lawrence is to blame for her naked picture leak, says Ricky Gervais, who later deleted his comment, his tweet there. I can't really make it out, but basically he said, yeah, if you don't want to have those pictures leaked, don't take the pictures in the first place.
Well, Ricky Gervais, as we all remember, is the person who leaked his own naked pictures of himself taking a bath. It didn't show much, thankfully, but
it was tasteful.
It was very tasteful. In a way. But I have to say his take on it, while it might not be the most popular or nice thing to say,
it's not very politically correct.
Yes,
you could say,
but there is a grain of truth.
There is, it's true. But the interesting part about this from the technological point of view is that the photos apparently were hacked, not specifically from a physical computer, but from iCloud,
right?
Which is Apple's supposedly very heavily encrypted storage system. So basically, how vulnerable are anyone's photos of their house cat or whatnot if they're that easily hacked? So that's kind of
well, as much as the internet loves pictures of cats.
And
it
does
even more
pictures of
naked celebrities.
This is true. Yeah.
So I don't know if I were a celebrity who would choose to take naked pictures of myself. I'm not sure I would back that up to anywhere.
Right. Yeah, just print them out, lock them in the vault, and then destroy the actual, photographic device.
But the list is much longer than just
Jennifer Lawrence is just at the top of that, but also, as far as I'm aware, Bar Raffaelli is potentially one of the people who or celebrities that has potential photos that may have been hacked.
Kate Upton,
Rihanna, I believe. Although with Rihanna, there's not that much. What's left? When she dresses up, it's a scandal. Anyway. Anyway, so I think we're going to be seeing more. The guy apparently is on the run, the one who actually leaked the photos.
Really?
The FBI, of course, is after him, so he's in a lot of
right.
hot
In
water.
the past, we've seen jail time 10 years
for the one in 2012, the guy who leaked the photos of Scarlett Johansson.
Right.
So yeah, it's serious stuff, and we make light of it in the press in a way, but it is serious stuff, and the right to privacy is
serious
is
matter,
a right,
no doubt.
serious matter. Also, a serious matter is Hitler. And that brings us no laughing permitted.
Serious matter.
Serious
no
matter.
doubt.
Gawker reports that Hitler's childhood home, this is on a cultural note, is poised to become a museum. Yes, there it is.
Really?
It's in Braunau, Austria.
His, art?
No. This is where he was born in 1889, Hitler, and he lived there with his
same
family.
house? Is it?
Yeah, that's the one.
The house still stands?
It's going to become the so-called House of Responsibility.
I see.
Yes. So basically will be a Holocaust museum. On some aspects of the Holocaust will be exhibitions about that. So the house is basically in pretty good shape.
I would imagine, I would imagine that it'll be torn down or something to prevent some sort of
neo-Nazi gathering
something down the line.
That's what I would have thought too. But it is kind of interesting that it's still standing. And so no word yet on when the actual museum will open, but plans are afoot.
Is somebody living there at the moment? I mean, is there a family?
But I hope not.
Would you want to? I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I once lived in Eugene O'Neill's old apartment or something like that, but he was like a gifted American playwright, and to live in Hitler's house is, it's a little bit emotionally freighted. Yes. Anyway, keeping things European and controversial, Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney is causing a stir because he is in a storm of abuse after urging Scotland to vote no on separating from the United Kingdom. And this is a big deal, of course, around in the United Kingdom, as September 18th, I believe, is the date of the referendum.
Why is he against it?
He thinks that everything should, the British unification, United Kingdom, united.
He likes having the Scots there as well.
Right. And he actually, and I forgot the name of the song. Of course, it's famous. He had a song about his involving like the love of Scotland back in post-Beatles, but maybe pre-Wings.
Post-Beatles.
I'm getting my chronology is a little bit off, but he's very much for the unity aspect. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of as that date approaches. And speaking of Britain, Hello Magazine, our one-stop source of upscale gossip, reports that Princess Diana's wedding dress is on its way home to Prince William and Harry, two princes. And this was
where was it till now?
It's actually been on display. It's been flying around the world. It was last seen in Cincinnati at a museum there for a celebration, kind of about her life and some of her artifacts. But it was in Princess Diana's will that it would eventually return to her sons.
It is an iconic dress.
Yeah, actually, and it was the Hello says that it's 25-foot train, the thing that was the longest one on a dress in royal history
at the time.
I think even still.
Well,
yeah.
Unless I don't know, Kim Kardashian or someone.
No, she's all about lack of a train. But actually, speaking of tasteful pop stars. Kesha is back in the news because she bought a house in Venice, not the one in Italy where Al Pacino was recently seen around the pool with a bunch of lovely ladies, but she bought a house in the trendy Venice section of Los Angeles. And it's interesting because it's actually quite modest by LA celebrity standards, only $1.65 million. She buys a tasteful house because she is a woman of taste. Well, you could debate that for days. And speaking of pop stars making headlines, of course, it brings us back to Madonna, because more secret lyrics have been leaked. Okay, and we're talking about the album that she's apparently working on. And now apparently she has slammed her ex-boyfriend Brahim Zebat in a new song. This was her much younger boyfriend who was now he's 26. Madonna just turned 600, something like that. But now I don't know if it's if she's trying to she's already taken aim at Guy Ritchie in previous songs, but now she's saying in this song apparently, I know you'd like it if I stayed home and cried, but that ain't gonna happen because I was never satisfied. So she's
Ouch.
taking aim at lots of
Pow.
yeah. So should she really? They had such a nice love. I mean, is it appropriate for her in lyrics to lash out thusly?
I don't know. I have to say I never saw their partnership as
As a
something,
blossoming romance,
something that to aspire to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm more
It's-
heartbroken over the Jay-Z Beyonce thing.
Oh, well, they actually might be still together. We don't know what's going on with that, but we can ask Miley Cyrus, who says Googling yourself can hurt. So this is...
Does she know what that means?
I think
Google
she,
yourself?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think she's basically talking about the this is ahead of her bangers for going to Australia, and she says that it's actually very philosophical of her that it's harmful to you.
Please, no,
yes,
tell
that,
me about
that,
how
that
Miley Cyrus.
it's like sticks and stones, that sort of thing. That it can be difficult for younger people using social media to find out what other people are saying about them online, and you would think that she'd have a thicker skin than that, but she apparently has hurt herself numerous times by Googling herself.
Really?
Yeah. And
Well, I hope she's not on the list of leaked pictures because it's only going to get worse.
I don't think
if it
she. I
does.
think that list is. I think you have to be like 30 and above. Or no, I should say that like maybe 25 and over. And Miley Cyrus
I
is
see.
she's really
barely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Last but not least,
this interesting show over the weekend in Paris about technology. And speaking of Googling yourself, this was a show about this sort of turning this idea of disruptive technological innovation on its head. And this was a hacking, sort of a reverse hacking event that tried to sort of ironically show how useless a lot of technological innovation is, and leave it to the French to point up some of the foibles.
so wait, is the dog?
That's an example of something that
is a possible hacker.
It's an example of something that might seem amazing and life-changing, but is actually just a strange costume on a chihuahua.
Always a good thing.
Yeah,
Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's bring in now, joining us is Ron Jacobson from Shalom TV. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Pleasure to have you. What beautiful, wonderful cultural stories do you have for us?
Well, after Tony's been bashing all the celebrities, I'm going to be easing up on them a bit. So, on a sadder note, Joan Rivers, of course, still in an induced coma at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. She is literally between life and death, because as it seems right now, even though it was an induced coma, they're afraid to waking her up, because if they take her off the machine, she might be gone.
Yeah, and I, from what I heard, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but Wednesday is when they said that they'll make up their minds if to keep her on the machines, or maybe.
Well, the thing is that at the end of the day, it's the family's decision, so it's not something that there's a deadline for that.
Right.
We can see is this positive outpour of support from celebrities across the board, and Joan Rivers was controversial at times.
She was.
And I think that if we look back a little bit at her career, she started in the 50s. She's
been around forever.
Very long time, and she was a replacement to Johnny Carson at times. But she really will forever be remembered for the red carpet that she has really redefined what red carpet is all about, and she has really set up what we see today on red carpets, and probably will forever. So very sad days for Joan Rivers at 81.
Yeah.
Some are blockbusters. Some of them big flops this year.
Really?
It is, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy summer.
It wasn't, and they didn't even have Operation Protective Edge. So 15% down the
box office.
The box office income, which
and
Hollywood
you're
makes
talking about in the U.S. or is
in the
this
US.
worldwide?
We're talking domestically.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, internationally, the box office was up, and that means that in Hollywood, more and more they will create movies with an international appeal rather than a domestic one. We've seen it already in the last few years. Big player, of course, China, which every year allows more and more Hollywood movies to be released there, and as a result, we see the box office take becoming bigger, because China is just a tiny little country.
And we see more Chinese actors involved in big Hollywood productions. We see also some blockbuster being shot in China even.
That we have seen, but it has to be like something that where it can fit in the plot, because the a Chinese backdrop is, it's very detectable. So it's not that you can do any movie there. Right. But as you were asking if there's more Chinese actors, no, actually Chinese want to see the Caucasians. They want to see something that's different than what they are. So why are blockbusters making less money in the U.S.? Are people attending fewer screenings? It seems like that. And Hollywood is scrapping their head how to bring them back. We've seen this whole ploy with 3D. Mm-hmm. It's still there, but it's not as strong. Now everybody's talking about the 4D and the 7D, which is the stools that go back and forth and throw things at you just to give you. But that's what it's going to be. But Marvel has proven that they are still the number one when it comes to creating movie.
Certainly.
Masters of the Galaxy is the only one that actually crossed the $300 million.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
Well, it's rightly so, if you ask me. The problem that we see is with fewer and fewer people going to the movies is that prices are going up.
Yes.
To make up for it. Is that the way they're going to keep going? Because they can't fight it forever. People have bigger TVs at home. They can watch a movie. They'll wait a few more weeks or months even and watch it at home.
Yeah, and you have, there's so many services that bring in the movies earlier. You have VOD and on demand and all those kind of things where people really can see movies in a very short time after they're released in theaters. They really have to come up with more movies that have an event and this whole chatter on Twitter and Facebook leading up to it. Although we've seen several movies this year who've done that and didn't really prove themselves at the box office. Right. Everybody's already talking what's going to happen in the next few years. We have the Star Wars coming back. We have James Bond coming back. So everybody's hoping
things to look forward to.
Yes, as always, because
if we look at the year, the whole year, is it also a problem, or are maybe fall movies making up for the summer? Is that happening?
No, because the fall movies are a different kind of movie. Those are the awards movies who tend to traditionally are the ones who make less money but win the big awards. It is the summer season actually that makes the big box office for the studios that help them operate on the smaller movies that will get them the golden statues.
Well, I'm not gonna lose any sleep over Hollywood's income just yet. Thank you, Ron, for speaking to me today. That's it from us for this morning. You can visit us on the web, i24news.tv. You can also visit our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Don't forget, join us again tomorrow morning to start your day. Every day, we'll be right here.